Filter in as they do. So, welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Melanie McDermott. I'm the Director of Marketing here at StoryShares and your host for this webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about writing strategies for older striving readers. And we have a wonderful panel of experts to talk to us about some of those really specific strategies. We're so glad you're here. Just going to do a quick overview so that everyone knows what to expect. I'm going to go through a little introduction. I will introduce our panelists, and then we're going to dive into a strategy share. By the end of this webinar, you'll have 3 writing strategies that you can take away and hopefully use in your classroom tomorrow. That's our goal with these webinars, is that you walk away with some really actionable resources. So we will spend the most of our time talking through those writing strategies, and then if there's time at the end, we will do a Q&A and a quick closing. Since we can't see anyone's faces except the panelists, we would love for you to be in the chat, talking with us, talking with each other. If you have a question or comment for the whole group, everyone who's here, you can put it in the chat. If you have a more specific question that you want to just go to the panelists, you can use the Q&A function. Okay, so real quick, if you are new to StoryShares, welcome. We're so happy you're here. StoryShares is a literacy organization that is created for older striving readers. We focus on readers in grades 3 and up, and we publish decodable chapter books and literacy or intervention curriculum that's made specifically for those older readers. But more importantly, we're trying to transform the way that we see literacy in the older grades, because we know that school doesn't end in 3rd grade and literacy instruction shouldn't either. So quick poll, if I can get it on the screen. We'd love to know what age group you work with. So I'm going to launch this poll, and you can tell us, we can see who's out there in the audience, which age group you're working with. Okay, seeing high school, mixed age group. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Middle school. Excellent. All right, so lots of people are mixed age group, which makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Welcome. Okay, looks like most people have participated. And I can share the results. There you go. Cool. Okay, let's kick things off with some panelist introductions. First up, we have Jillian Conies. Jillian is a school-based leader in Philadelphia schools. Jillian, would love for you to tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so happy to be here. I've got 16 years of experience as an educator. 14 of those years were as a classroom teacher, teaching ELA for middle and/or high school. There were some years that were a combo of both. 10 of those years, I have experience designing and facilitating professional learning, and I'm currently in my 4th year as a school-based teacher leader in Philadelphia, which is essentially an instructional coaching position. A lot of my focus has been on improving instruction to support student literacy and build confidence across disciplines. So I'm really excited to join today.
Awesome. Such a wealth of knowledge. We're so, so grateful that you're here. Next up, we have Katie Inslee. Katie is a teacher, reading specialist, Wilson dyslexia practitioner, and also a curriculum designer here at StoryShares. Katie, tell us more about you.
Well, you just introduced me with everything that I have. I have over 20 years of teaching experience. I was a classroom teacher in elementary for 10 years. Then I moved to reading specialist for 8 years. For 3 years, I worked as an academic interventionist in high school. And I am back now as a 4th grade ELA teacher. So I've been all over the place working with all kinds of students, mixed groups, everything. I found them.
Amazing. Such a spectrum of knowledge. We are so glad you're here. And last up, we have Shira Engel, who is our Chief Academic Officer here at StoryShares.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shira, and I actually started my career in education as a 3rd grade teacher, and then realized very quickly through my graduate program and my student teaching experiences that older students is just really where I thrived as an educator. But I did have the experience of teaching my first class of sixth graders and noticing that there was one table in my classroom in the back where all the students sitting at that table were still working on sounding out single syllable words. And I panicked. I did not know how to support those students. I knew how to teach them. My master's is in secondary English education. I was like, I can teach them how to write a literary analysis essay or an argument essay. But I was like, I have no idea how to teach them how to read. So I ended up taking not a step back, but I ended up going back to school to become a dyslexia specialist and to learn how to use those tools, not necessarily with students who have a formal dyslexia diagnosis, but with students who were still working on foundational literacy skills who needed more of a structured literacy lens. And I'm so excited to be here with all of you today because I love reading intervention programs. I kind of became an interventionist by accident, and I always really wanted them to have a writing component because that was what could have connected the intervention to the work that I was doing in my tier one instruction. And so I have yet to meet an older striving reader who is not also an older striving writer. So I'm very excited to have this crew gathered here today to talk about ways to support those students.
Yay. Awesome. Exciting. Thank you, Shara. Let's dive right into some strategies. Our first strategy is brought to us by Jillian, who's going to be talking to us about writing to learn. So take it away, Jillian.
Thank you, Melanie. I think it's really important that we build the confidence of our striving readers and writers. Just because a student is still working on strengthening their foundational skills doesn't actually mean that they don't already have the ability to be deep critical thinkers. And I think that is something that gets missed by a lot of educators, parents, people, all different types of stakeholders. So when I'm talking about writing to learn, I'm talking about low stakes and informal writing opportunities that are embedded throughout the learning block, right? So we should be doing these consistently throughout different parts of our lessons. And they should be designed to help students process their own ideas. And it should be a time where we're not really stressing about grammar and spelling. Part of why I really emphasize using writing to learn in classrooms is I consistently noticed that my students who were striving readers and writers were so hesitant to share any idea sometimes because they were worried they were going to get it wrong. But they had these brilliant ideas. If I sat and talked with them one-on-one and was listening to what they were saying, they had a lot to offer, but they were so scared to put something on the page that it prevented them from actually learning some of those foundational skills as writers that would strengthen their communication skills. So we started actually talking about writing to learn as something that is different from learning to write. If we're learning to write, maybe it's a lesson that's on appropriate grammar or punctuation, sentence structure, paragraph structure, revision and editing, that sort of thing. What I actually ended up doing was starting by explicitly teaching students the difference between when we are learning to write and when we're writing to learn. So for me, that always looks like co-creating a list of some of the different ways we might write to learn. When are times that you're using writing to flesh out an idea or process something that you've just experienced? And I welcome them to share ideas that are from class or just things they do on their own. So kids will always talk about, oh, I use a journal or I have a sketchbook where I'm putting down ideas. That's writing to learn. You're learning about yourself when you do that, right? So when I have them understand that difference, then I can use that language in class and students know when they're actually learning how to write. So I need to worry about things like my sentence structure, my grammar. But if I'm writing to learn, there's less pressure. Let's get the ideas on the page first, and then we can play around with all of the different foundational pieces after that. I can't revise or edit a blank page, but I can do a lot with some ideas that are on the page already. So I think none of these examples are things that you might be unfamiliar with. I'm sure that many of you are using these in your classrooms already. I think what's different is how we message it to students so that it, number one, builds their confidence and then becomes a useful tool later on when they are doing more formalized types of writing. So I put some of my favorite ones here on this slide. I think visible thinking strategies are one of the easiest ways to get opportunities for students to write as they're processing their own ideas. One of my personal favorites is called I used to think, now I think, and it is Shira will tell you one of my all-time favorite exit ticket opportunities to use for any content under the sun. You can use this in an ELA class, a history class, a science class, a math class. Get the students writing about something that they have changed their thinking about by the end of the lesson. So that is a super simple frame that you can use. Second thing that I like to do is stop and jots. I do these in two ways. Sometimes I ask students to do a stop and jot around a particular question. Maybe that's a framing question that I tell them about before we do some reading together or some reading independently. Sometimes there's a specific question that I don't even give to them until we're halfway through. And other times I let them decide what they want to stop and jot about. But it's another opportunity for them to write about the things that they are reading or viewing or experiencing in the class. And the last part is journal entries. I think having informal opportunities to write about the topics we're learning about is one of the easiest ways for students to process. It is, I'll even say for myself, I get nervous sometimes sharing a new idea if I'm studenting, right? I just finished another master's program and I was sometimes hesitant to share an idea I had because I was worried what people will think. But if I was able to take the time to kind of write my thoughts out, give myself time to process, give myself time to reflect, it felt more comfortable. The important thing, I think, is to make sure that as we're doing these pieces of writing, they should happen across the entire block of learning. So we should be doing them at the beginning, the middle, and the end all throughout. And then make sure that we give opportunities for students to discuss their writing to learn opportunities with other people. Discussion actually helps to further build students' confidence in sharing their own ideas. And it's also going to allow them to practice communicating their ideas clearly out loud. That can be really helpful for striving readers and for striving writers because they know how to say it. It's just sometimes they get stuck on how do I put that on the page. So if they can say it out loud, then they can write it exactly like they just said it. So that's a really helpful tool. The last thing that I think is super important is that writing to learn opportunities can always be used as a scaffold to larger, more formal pieces of writing. So if you know what your essay question at the end of a unit is going to be, have them start doing stop and shots specifically on that question all throughout, because then they've got tons of evidence that they can pull when they hit that end of unit assessment. So make sure to work those informal low stakes writing opportunities in as often as possible. And I'm sure that you'll have the same experience as I did, which is seeing my students become more confident in writing and sharing their writing.
I love that so much. We talk so much about learning to read versus reading to learn, and not very often do I hear writing to learn versus learning to write. So I love that idea. And I also love the idea of having low stakes ways to share. Yeah, because to your point, like everyone feels a little uncomfortable to share a new idea at first. So those were so, so helpful. Thank you. Next up, we have Katie's strategy about graphic organizers.
So when I was working with at the elementary level, graphic organizers were a huge tool that we had in our toolbox. I mean, these students are young. We're first teaching them. We're the first teachers. We're teaching them how to do something. So it was always, let's use a graphic organizer for this. Let's use a graphic organizer for that. So students who, whether they were struggling readers or not, they were given a graphic organizer as their initial tool. So what I learned from going from elementary to high school was that that tool is often taken away, sometimes too soon. And it isn't against any teacher or any staff member, but oftentimes the culture that at least I found at the schools that I was working at were that these are teenagers. We're trying to make them young adults. We're trying to build them further along. We're trying to get them here. And they were forgetting that they're still just kids. And if they weren't given the proper instruction or they missed pieces, because remember, you're in high school, you don't know the instruction that they had from K-8. They might have missed pieces. So when I first started as an academic interventionist, I was working with at-risk students. They were coming in, they were at risk of failing, they were at risk of not graduating. And the goal of my program was to get these students to fill in skill gaps, to give them enough education that they need to be successful in their classes. So they would come to me. I didn't have a curriculum. They would come to me and say, this is what I'm working on in English. This is what I'm working on in chemistry. This is what I'm working on in biology, whatever it is. And we would have to come up with a plan on how to fill in those skill gaps, whether it was reading or writing. The biggest one that we had was writing an essay. A lot of these struggling readers had a really hard time sitting down and writing. They had a ton of ideas. Just like Jillian was saying, they would come to me and they would tell me exactly what they wanted to say. But when it came to breaking it down and actually putting it on paper, they were stuck. And oftentimes they were stuck because they wanted to start at the very beginning with that hook. And hook is the hardest thing for a student to get wrap their brain around. So they would be stuck at that hook. They'd sit there for 3 days with nothing on their paper because they're stuck trying to figure out what to write first. So I had a student who actually had a wonderful English teacher who gave her a graphic organizer. And the girl came to me and said, I'm still stuck. I don't know how to fill this out. It's too much. It's overwhelming. So when I looked at this graphic organizer, I thought it was amazing. It was beautiful. It had everything in there that the student needed. So I had to have a discussion with her and say, like, what is the issue? What is the problem? This graphic organizer is wonderful. Came out, it was too much. There were too many words. So what the teacher had done was she broke down the writing prompt. The first paragraph, if you look at the graphic organizer I have up here, the first paragraph had intro, hook, question, summary, everything all down the row. It had one box for them to type in instead of broken down into rows. So through my discussion with this student, my first year in high school, we broke it down further. She helped me make this graphic organizer, helped make it work for her. And I used it with all of my students after that because it really resonated with her. And the students who have a hard time starting, but they can fill in their evidence. I've got lots of evidence. Going back to Jillian's point, they're stop and jotting. They've got evidence galore all the time. So they can fill in their evidence. Then they're writing their thesis. And oftentimes these students have executive functioning issues as well, where their time management is not there. Or I had high school students that were working almost every night. So they're going home from school, they're working sometimes till 8 o'clock at night and sometimes till midnight. So we would have assignments that were, okay, you're given an essay to write on Monday. You have until Sunday night at 11:59. That's 7 days, including today. How many rows are there? How many boxes? Let's fill it in. The biggest takeaway that my students had with this, they're struggling readers, they're struggling writers. They haven't had success at a full essay. So the way this is designed is that however the teacher's parameters are, let's say it's Times New Roman 12 font, because that's pretty much what it is. That's how the graphic organizer is. So all the student has to do is fill this out with their ideas and then copy and paste it into a paragraph form onto the essay. So they're not feeling like they just did double work. Why does this student not have to do a graphic organizer, but I do? By using it like this, when this is over, it takes 5 minutes for a high schooler to copy it over into an essay format and you're done. They found great success. I had students who would sit and write essays and then they would come to me and say, I added more to my essay once I copied it over there. I'm like, that's amazing. These are students who were struggling and refused to do the essays in their classroom. But when they came into my room and were given a tool that was manageable, teaching them how to break it apart. So if you look at the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say there's 15 boxes and you have 7 days. I would always tell them plan on 5 days. So that way you have 2 cushion days in case you're working one night, you can't get to it. So we would break it apart. Okay, I have to have 5 boxes done every single day. That tells me I'll be on track. If you miss a day, then you have to build that in and do 6 boxes a day. So by the end of the 5 days, your essay is written and all you have to do is copy it over. So just giving them that option and giving them the tool. I'm not going to lie, these students were at risk, which means I had to sit with them and help guide them. The first couple graphic organizers we did. But by the end, I had some seniors that were writing their own graphic organizers just like this. They made their own copy of an old one. They filled in the information that the teacher needed because they watched me do it. If you have a template, it takes 5 minutes to fill in whatever the teacher wants. And I always gave them to start a thesis. Like this is your example. You could use this and just fill in the blanks. Sentence starters are amazing for these high schoolers because again, they have a hard time starting. We want to see what is in their brain, what ideas they have, because they have amazing things up there. It's just getting them to put it down on paper that can be a big struggle.
Katie, wow. I had goosebumps when you were talking about your student who kind of like helped walk you through what she really needed to be able to access the graphic organizer. And I think that's such a gift for both of you that you were able to have that conversation and figure it out. And then you helped so many students with that knowledge. We're always talking about entry points, like how can we provide more entry points for striving readers and writers? And this is just a perfect example. And I love that you gave us this graphic organizer example, but also like told us how to use it and how you've modified it, because that really makes such a difference. So
Well,
thank
one thing I forgot to mention is that I use this now in a simpler form, but I use this now with my fourth graders.
you. Yeah,
That is how simple it is, that it's adaptable to any grade level. That's teaching writing.
yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. This is like so wonderful and ideal. Just I don't want to. I hate that we have to rush a little bit, but I'm keeping an eye on time and want to make sure we get to our third strategy, which is sentence frames with Shira.
Thank you. Well, I will actually kind of continue what you both already talked about with some different ways that we can use sentence frames. Like so many things in the education world, there are many different words and terms to describe similar scaffolds. So sentence frames are sometimes called sentence frames, and that usually means that there is a frame for the student's idea. So there's a beginning of the sentence that's written out, and there's an end of the sentence that's written out, and students are filling in the content in between. They're also sometimes called closed paragraphs, CLOZE. This and closed paragraphs are often used more as a reading comprehension exercise. Um, they kind of look like a Mad Libs. That is kind of the simplest example of what that could look like. Although instead of filling in nonsense, you're using the context of the paragraph to fill in the blanks. And then they're also sometimes called sentence stems or sentence starters when they're used at the beginning of a sentence, but not at the end. So these are very flexible scaffolds that can be used and removed strategically. And I want to emphasize that removed piece because if we give a student a scaffold that they no longer need, that scaffold no longer serves them. And there are many different ways to offer students sentence frames, sentence stems, sentence starters, whatever we're calling it, and to slowly remove that scaffold over time as they gain writing proficiency. So these are basically fill in the blank templates, and the blanks align with the objective of the lesson, with what we want students to learn. So this is a scaffold that can bridge that what Jillian talked about, that learning to write and writing to learn. Because what we do in everything that is not a blank with a sentence stem is we are modeling effective writing for students. So we are showing them how we are starting off a paragraph or ending a paragraph. We're showing them how we're citing text evidence by doing that stem for them. But what we are having them fill in is what we want them to learn from the lesson, from the reading, from their writing, from the content area. And that's what they are filling in. So it decreases, just like what Katie showed with the graphic organizers, where we're kind of decreasing the cognitive load for students so that they can focus on one particular thing that they are writing about. And they model the writing structure, and they can also model how to answer a prompt. So you can see in this first image, in this written response to reading, a this is a version of a very popular, I think, kind of closed paragraph or sentence frame called SWBST, somebody wanted, but so then. I first learned about it in the book When Kids Can't Read What Teachers Can Do by Kylene Beers. And this is there. If you searched SWBST, you will find so many graphic organizers, so many fill in the blanks online, different ways that information is displayed for students. But that blank in this case, it's a story blank is a story about So somebody wanted blank, but blank, so blank. So there's a lot happening. It's a lot about plot, character motivation, but there are sentence frames and keywords that prompt students for what to include next. Um, Right below, there are some sentence starters. These are examples from some of our Story Shares decodable books. And if I am asking a student, what does Ming, our main character, what does Ming learn at the end of the chapter? I can use a variety of sentence starters to get them ready to answer that prompt. The most basic one that I could use, which is not here because the students who are doing this need a larger scaffold, is at the end of the chapter, Ming learns that. And so I'm rephrasing the question into a sentence stem. And I'm modeling that for students with the goal of students eventually learning how to do that themselves. And then eventually, even beyond that, being able to answer a prompt, maybe without rewording the prompt into a sentence stem. If I want to give them a little more content, I can say Ming uses clay to help him discover, and I'm bringing in something else from the plot. And then in that last image, the 5 W's of the legend of Bigfoot, that is an example of using sentence frames and sentence stems inside a graphic organizer. So that if students need an additional scaffold, in addition to the graphic organizer itself, I'm layering on that as another scaffold. And I did drop in the chat, just in case anyone missed it, a link to visible thinking routines. And that the like I used to think, now I think is an example of one of those as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks for putting that resource in the chat. And yeah, this felt like it was so fast, but I'm so appreciative to all three of you for giving us such actionable strategies that like I could picture using this in my classroom tomorrow. So thank you to Jillian and Katie and Shira. Unfortunately, I think we ran out of time for Q&A, but if anyone does have questions, you can email us at info@storyshares.org or like put it quickly in the chat and we can jot it down to remember to follow up with you. I did see there was, oh, I've lost my mouse. Someone was active in the chat, but it doesn't look like there was any questions.
There was a question that came up on the Q&A function about getting a copy of the resource. Shira responded to ask which specific resource, but maybe we can, there's another question about links in an email for the stuff we've shared.
Yes, we can definitely share links to all of these resources. I think, Katie, are you comfortable sharing? Not to put you on the spot. Yes, we will follow up with links to the resources in email. Great. Okay. Just wanted to plug next time, our webinar in December 11th, is all about family school partnerships for supporting those older striving readers. We're really excited. We're working with several representatives from different organizations, and we have a parent of a striving reader who's going to be joining us for that panel. So you can scan that QR code or go to storyshares.org and look for webinars to register for that. And then also, we have a couple other events coming up. Winter webinars. Winter is coming. Did it work? Oh, it didn't work. Sorry, I tried really hard to get this gift to work. Anyway, we are doing a couple of events with the Reading League, various chapters, and would love to invite you to those as well. This information is also on our website because we're rushing right now. Okay, we made it to the end at 4:30. Go team. Katie, Jillian, Shira, thank you so, so much. We appreciate you. It was so fun to learn with you. And anyone who's out there, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at info@storyshares.org. And thank you everyone so much for coming and hope you have a great night.